Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the next version and episode of Marketers on the Move. And today I've got really great pleasure in introducing you to a very fine man by the name of Ted Katz. Hello, Ted. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Peter?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine. Not as cold as you are in Canada because I'm living in Thailand.
Good envious there.
Yeah. All right. So now look, to help introduce Ted, let me just share his bio, and I'm going to read it because my eyes are getting a bit old and my memory's getting short these days. But here it is. Like many people, Ted struggled for a few years trying to make money online. Although these experiences and frustrations are all too common, it wasn't until he embraced what he calls the some assembly required approach that things started to turn around. And Ted, that really grabbed my curiosity and attention. Some assembly required. So that goes to my very first question to you. What do you mean by some attention required?
Actually, some assembly required, Peter. And
sorry, assembly required.
That's yes. Okay. I'll keep it brief, and we can expand on this later if needed. But it starts with an understanding that business is not 100% ready to use right out of the box. It does require some pieces to be put together and some components to be assembled just so in order for it to be operational completely. And really, that's at the end of the day, it starts, like I said, with an understanding that that's the case, but then also requiring an understanding of what are these parts, how do they get assembled, and what's necessary to make it all work.
Okay, so with some assembly required, Ted, you actually not only point out what the units are, but also show them how to put it together?
Correct. I mean, ultimately, if I may just expand then, I'll give you an analogy. I mean, I don't want to derail you from whatever questions you had for me, so we can get into this later if you'd like.
No. Please go ahead. I mean, because you've got my curiosity. I'm sure you have other people's curiosity.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll give you an analogy. There's a very famous global furniture chain. I won't state the name for, obviously certain reasons, but everyone's familiar with them. And what they do is they sell furniture that is brought to you in pieces. And the different pieces come with instructions. Those instructions are typically in picture format. And oftentimes at the very top of these instructions, it indicates what additional tools would be required to assemble the furniture. But for what it's worth, you purchase this furniture, you follow the instructions, and it lays out specifically how to put all the pieces together, how to put this into that, how to connect this, and step by step, it lays it out for you. I know I'm probably jumping ahead of things here, but at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is the fact that while everyone who buys this furniture follows the exact same instructions, some people just have a knack for putting this all together, and yet others, they still really struggle even though it's the exact same instructions.
Understand. I think I understand the furniture company you're referring to. It comes from Europe, right?
Correct. And again, like I said, I think most people would be familiar with that, and with the analogy itself know exactly what I'm talking about.
And you know what? I can relate to that, Ted. I mean, I'm one of the most impractical people you'll ever see. And they, I nearly said their name, but they deliver in flat packs, right?
Correct.
And you were right on the button when you said they give you strict step-by-step instructions and even give you the diagrams to follow to do that.
Correct.
And to put this screw in this hole and all this sort of stuff.
That's
right. You know what? When I did that, I still mucked it up.
Well, that's exactly my point, is that it's the same instructions. Some people, as you just said, to use your words, muck it up. Yes, others have a bit of a knack for it, whether they're handy or what have you. But again, it's all about the instructions, but more importantly, the ability to follow those instructions to create, the masterpiece that you're looking for.
Right. And what a great analogy, because I mean, when you think about this, people who are starting off their online marketing careers are frustrated, they are overwhelmed, they're confused, and very few people actually will give them a step-by-step process as you're alluding to here. And that's why now I can start to really appreciate the importance of some assembly required. Very, very clever, Ted, very clever. Sorry, question two.
Okay.
And you may have partially answered this already, but where did this idea come from?
As you mentioned, I did partially reference this, but again, I'll go with another analogy, a story that I know most, if not everyone listening to this can relate to. But I remember as a child, when you're a kid, you see ads for toys that you want, and the ad will very clearly state some assembly required. The box will prominently indicate some assembly required. Now, the thing is, you beg your parents for this present or for this toy as a gift for whether it be a birthday or some holiday or whatever the situation or the season. And when you finally get it, I remember and recall the sheer joy and excitement of unwrapping this thing and getting so excited. I get to play with this thing. But then how that excitement turns into immediate disappointment because you have to wait for someone to put this thing together for you. Now, this is something that, I see you smiling, this is something that maybe, fewer people can relate to. I know there's plenty that can, because what I used to do, let's face it, children don't have the greatest of patience. Let's face it, a lot of adults don't have the greatest of patience to wait for something like that. But as a child, what I used to do is I would immediately grab it and want to play with it right away. And once again, I remember the sheer devastation that it just didn't work because it wasn't put together, it wasn't assembled.
Point taken. Good analogy, Ted. Because when you
that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, and because when you think about it, as I alluded to earlier, when people are just starting off their online experiences and journey, really they want to, one of the biggest issues, I'm sure you do this, is to manage their expectations, right? When it comes to success rates, because some people, for some strange reason, think that because they're going online, they can start making money in 24 hours.
Right.
Now, you can if you're probably gambling it. I don't know, right? But generally speaking, their expectations are way out of whack. Right. And that's why that analogy with the children is so clever, very clever, because they need to be able to not only understand the process, but also appreciate the time it's going to take for them to implement what you teach them, correct?
You got it.
Okay. Number 3 question, and thank you, Ted. I'm really enjoying meeting with you because you have got some very clever analogies, and obviously you're a fine coach and teacher. Number 3, what makes this approach different from others?
Okay, great question again, and to some extent I've already alluded to it. So let's kind of loop back to the analogy of that furniture store, that European furniture store that you mentioned. But once someone has all of the components, it's important to make sure that you have a step-by-step layout, in terms of how all of the pieces fit together. And only when you have that complete roadmap and guide, and again, the instructions, like you said, insert this screw into this slot and all of these different things, that's where it's going to help anyone really come to an understanding of this is what it's going to take. And what makes it different is ultimately, having a complete, again, set of instructions with all of the pieces in front of you.
Okay. So you would pride yourself in saying that you can give people a step-by-step set of instructions along with, quote unquote, the diagram such as the furniture company used, right? In other words, it's clarity. Correct. It's clarity, and they can hold you responsible for you delivering that to them, but they will be responsible for implementing it. Is that correct?
Precisely, and as part of that implementation, if we can go one step further, just like in the analogy I gave you, some people are just have a knack for following those pictures and, coming out at the end of it with exactly what they set out to build. Whereas others still need some hand holding in terms of, what do you mean by this screw? Am I using the right screw in this slot? And all of those pieces. So like you said, it's about making sure that you have someone to hold you accountable to be able to put it all together, but then also the other person, it's a two-way street in this case, is responsible for taking the action and responsibility of assembling it all and having that desired result and the desired outcome.
Okay, so your Some Assembly Required also provides the services of not just providing step-by-step, but also by following up and supporting and working with people. Is that correct? To implement
Correct.
it?
Correct.
Right. That is a really good service, Ted. That is very good. All right. Question 4. We probably partially answered this as well, actually, but still. Who is this ideally for?
Great question again. I mean, if you think about just, generally speaking, this is what most people will think in terms of experience levels that individuals have. You're going to think of 3 stages: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And it's natural to think that the beginner is someone who's just starting out, the intermediate is someone who's experiencing a little bit of results, and the advanced person is someone that, well, this is their full-time gig. And these aren't necessarily definitions, but it's what I'll use for the purpose of responding to this question. The beginner, let's put this as someone who they're not making money. At this point, again, for lack of better terms, let's just qualify it as that. The intermediate is making some, maybe a few $100s a month. They're taking a nice vacation every single year, but they're still working a job full-time to generate their primary source of income. Mm-hmm. And the advanced, obviously, like I said, is someone that's doing this as a full-time career. That's what, generally speaking, most people will think of in terms of the stages that exist. But what I've learned is something that, and this goes kind of what you were talking about in terms of the bio, what I've learned is that there is a phase, kind of like a 4th phase, that fits in between phase 1 and phase 2, or stage 1 and stage 2. And that's someone that they have the knowledge, they're not just starting out, they have the knowledge of someone who's in that intermediate stage. But the thing is, their results are more like a beginner, someone who's not making money. And mm-hmm. what I like to call that stage is the advanced beginner. And what I find is, and this is from experience, I mean, when you spend many years in that stage, you can appreciate it and relate. But this is where I find the vast majority of people in this industry are sitting, because they're not quite the beginner anymore, but they haven't yet migrated to that level 2, if you will, of intermediate. And the most interesting thing that I find is that is the toughest shift, is to go into that stage 2 of intermediate, because once you're an intermediate and you're making some money consistently, it's not as difficult to then turn this into a full-time gig if that's what you want to do. But it's that making that shift from stage 1 or stage 1A, let's call it, again, that advanced beginner, to that intermediate, that's the toughest challenge. And that's where I find the vast majority of people in this business are lurking.
Okay. But you raise an interesting point, Ted, because once as you said before, once they get to the intermediate level and getting some consistent cash flow, that normally is associated with a build-up of confidence, right? Because mm-hmm. they're starting to believe in their ability to do the job. And so the next step to get them from there to a full-time, which you refer to as advanced, could be something that they would like to do, but they're not too sure how to do it. You could also come in there and help them, couldn't you?
Absolutely, because sometimes it's just a matter of scaling to get the results, but the confidence that the scaling is something that they're willing to do. But at the end of the day, you're on point. So there's definitely some things that people need to move from one stage to the next, and it really depends on what someone aspires to in terms of their overall goals and objectives. But as I said, and I alluded to, that what I found is that the toughest shift for people to make is moving from that beginner, or in this case, advanced beginner stage, to that intermediate, because that's where the biggest obstacles and roadblocks, seem to occur.
Okay, but I'm going to just stretch you a bit more, because if there's anyone watching this who is what you would call advanced, in other words, you're doing this on a full-time basis and you've experienced success in the past, quite a deal of success. Quite often, these sort of people plateau out, okay? Mm-hmm. And they just don't seem to be able to make the jump to any other level. They're doing well, but they're not doing brilliantly, and there's no real growth taking place. Does that make sense?
That's true, yeah.
So would your Some Assembly Required strategy help that sort of person as well?
Well, without a doubt, it would certainly be, and I want to be upfront with you. It would on a lesser scale, because the assembly has been mostly put together. So it's just about assembling one last piece, perhaps one or two last pieces, as opposed to, by comparison, the other group that I described, where they have all the parts in front of them, but they haven't assembled any of them, or maybe one or two together, and they don't know how to complete the rest of the assembly, which is still, 8 or 9 steps potentially.
Mm-hmm. But my point was this. These people in the advanced level who plateaued off quite often have forgotten the basics.
Right.
And you'd be a person who not just can ensure that they're coming back to, because people chase shiny objects even at the most advanced levels, right? And they lose focus and they lose direction. Mm-hmm. So your sum assembly required for an advanced person could have in particular an accountability factor.
Yeah.
And I think that will be pretty clever anyway. But the point made, it's really ideally set up for that advanced beginner, if we call it something else.
Yes,
right?
that's the group that needs the most work and support.
Yeah, because they're there now. They do understand some terminology. They're not completely brand new, right? Mm-hmm. But they don't know how to put it all together. I mean, they wouldn't know they know what an email marketing campaign. They maybe even know what an autoresponder is, right? But they're not sure how to set it up anyway.
Well, exactly that. I mean, if you think about it, they understand the components of, they got to, let's talk about affiliate marketing. They know that they need to find the right offer. They need to drive traffic to that offer, but they want to build a list. So they need to set up their autoresponder. They need to build a squeeze page. They want to perhaps build a bridge page to, pre-sell them to that offer. I mean, again, how to connect all of these things together to make it effective, because, that's the missing component. It's at the end of the day, those things that, once again, some assembly is required.
Right. And that's why the advanced beginner is the ideal person you're looking for, because the beginner wouldn't even know what an autoresponder was, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well done, Ted. Appreciate that. Now, with that in mind, after people listening to this, how can they contact you to learn some more?
Okay, great. Well, listen, Peter, at the end of the day, there's a couple different ways. I mean, I'm on Facebook, so you can look me up there and message me from there. I have an email that I set up for just such an occasion, and I'll get that email to you in just a moment. But I just want to kind of tantalize people with a couple bonuses for connecting with me that I'm going to share right now. And the first bonus is you'll have access to a fully functional funnel that ultimately is been proven, it's been battle tested to produce results. Not only that, you need to have the traffic to send to that funnel to produce those results. So you'll have access to that as well. And then as a surprise bonus that I've just literally secured, very, very recently, is one of my mentors has put out a book that for just really uncovering the truth about affiliate marketing, and I will again have access to providing anyone who connects with me through this with a free copy. So again, if nothing else, those 3 reasons alone are worth getting in touch with me for that. But here's the most important thing. I don't want to have you go into, onto my list and get through automated messages like that. I want people to connect with me personally, whether it be on Facebook or whether it be through my email, because I want to respond to everyone individually. I want to respond personally. I want to find out, where are you at? What are you struggling with? So like I said, you can find me on Facebook. And just look for my name, Ted Katz. You've seen the likeness, so you'll find my image. And that email that I talked about is tedkatzhelp@gmail.com. I'll spell that out for you. That's TEDKATZ, depending on which part of the world you're in, HELP@gmail.com. Again, that's TEDKATZHELP@gmail.com. Now, most importantly, when you connect with me by sending me that message, please indicate in the subject line, interview bonus, because that way I will know this is where you came from, and I'll hook you up with those bonuses right away. And we'll get to know each other. We'll get to chatting. We'll go from there.
What a fantastic offer, Ted. Truly incredible. I mean, apart from the affiliate marketing book, the idea of giving people a sales funnel that is proven and then traffic to put in it, I mean, that is something that people are truly striving for and never got. And you're going to give that to them before they even do anything with you. Is that correct?
Well, exactly. I mean, ultimately, it's having access to something that the
Wow.
pieces have been put together and it works, and you just have to follow instructions to start seeing
Wow.
some results. Now, listen, Peter, I want to really address something that, for lack of a better term, it's been referred to as the elephant in the room, and most people are probably thinking this, so I may as well talk about it now. What's the catch? Why are you doing this, Ted? And quite simply, it's really, I mean, part of me obviously wanting to help, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to build an audience. I'd like to build an audience of people that I've helped, that I have, impacted in some positive way, and use your testimonial. I would love to hear from you that I've managed to impact you and move you forward, because that will do a few things. Number one is, of course, it'll create, a loyal tribe, as they say. But if nothing else, if I've managed to help you, you'll stick with me forever. And more importantly, as I build, future, whether it be coaching programs or anything else, you will be able to be, in that ground floor, to have been there from the beginning, that I've impacted and helped out. And again, your story will serve as inspiration for many others.
Fantastic, Ted. And for
Mm-hmm.
those who are watching, facebook.com/ted.katz, that's K-A-T-Z, .142. facebook.com/ted.katz, .142. And the reason I did want to emphasize that is because Ted has made it very clear he wants to speak to people one-on-one. One of the most powerful ways of doing that is Facebook Messenger. It's even more powerful than email sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I just want to conclude by saying thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for creating what I would regard as an exciting opportunity for many people. And I wish you every success, with some assembly required.
Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate you having me, and it was really a pleasure speaking to you today.
Okay, take care, everybody.